Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Zodiac Secrets In Tarot.com. In this episode of the Lady Magnate's Magic Podcast, we're diving very deep into exorcisms and energetic liberation to discuss a spiritual perspective on clearing dark forces. So, grab your favorite cup of antioxidants, whether it's green tea, coffee, or red wine, and join us for this insightful exploration. The word exorcism carries a heavy weight. For many, it conjures vivid, dramatic images of darkened rooms, convulsing bodies, and priests commanding demons in ancient tongues. Popular media has woven a mythology around this practice, turning it into a terrifying spectacle, often associated only with horror, trauma, or religious extremism. But the deeper truth of exorcism, stripped of cinematic sensationalism and theological rigidity, is far more nuanced, sacred, and universal. At its essence, exorcism is not about theatrical confrontations with evil. It is the sacred act of restoring harmony where imbalance has taken root. It is a process of liberation, a spiritual healing practice that acknowledges the presence of disharmony within or around a person, and invokes higher guidance to dispel, transform, or release it. While mainstream interpretations have confined it to the rites of organized religion, particularly Catholicism, exorcism in its broader, more ancient sense belongs to the realm of spiritual energy work. It is a healing modality as old as human consciousness itself. To understand exorcism from a spiritual perspective, we must first move beyond dogma and superstition. This means setting aside the inherited images of punitive deities and eternal damnation, and instead viewing the human experience through the lens of energetic integrity. All beings exist within a field of energy. Thoughts, emotions, past experiences, and external influences shape this field. Just as the physical body can be infiltrated by viruses, the energetic body, sometimes called the aura, can be impacted by dense, disruptive, or parasitic forces. These forces may arise in many ways: unresolved trauma, ancestral pain, emotional entanglements, exposure to collective fear, or even environments saturated with disharmony. In some cases, they may be personified as spirits, entities, or energetic parasites. In other traditions, they are described as thought forms, shadow projections, or imprints from other timelines or realities. Regardless of terminology, the effect is the same: a distortion in one's vibrational field that creates confusion, suffering, stagnation, or disconnection from the soul's truth. Authentic spiritual exorcism seeks not to punish or destroy, but to bring clarity, light, and coherence where chaos has entered. It is not rooted in fear, but in love. It is not an act of domination, but one of restoration, calling upon divine intelligence to reestablish sovereignty, truth, and inner peace. One of the most important shifts in understanding exorcism is to recognize that it is not confined to any single religious doctrine. While Catholicism has perhaps the most formally institutionalized version of exorcism, the practice exists, often in more fluid and integrative forms, across nearly every spiritual tradition. Indigenous shamans, Sufi mystics, Tibetan monks, African spiritual healers, yogic adepts, and esoteric practitioners throughout history have engaged in similar work under different names, using tools appropriate to their cultural and spiritual frameworks. What unites these traditions is not the language they use or the rituals they perform, but the archetypal truth at the heart of their work, that human beings can, at times, become spiritually misaligned or energetically entangled, and that's sacred. Conscious intervention can assist in restoring balance. The presence of spiritual interference is not a sign of moral failure or weakness. It is part of the human condition. Like emotional wounds or physical ailments, energetic disturbances are part of life's terrain, and they're navigable. This understanding reframes exorcism from something frightening and alien into something deeply compassionate and familiar. It is not only about casting something out. It is about bringing something home, bringing the fragmented pieces of one's being back into wholeness, clearing away energies that do not belong, and reuniting the self with its original light. Moreover, when we step back and observe the mythologies of cultures across the globe, we see a common thread: stories of possession, dark forces, spiritual intrusion, and the reclaiming of the self through sacred rites. These myths are not random. They arise from a collective recognition of something real, not necessarily in the literal form the stories portray, but in the symbolic language of the soul. The concept of being possessed by something external often mirrors the very human experience of being overtaken by grief, rage, addiction, or despair. Whether the source is perceived as a spirit, a trauma, or a thought form, the core theme is the same: the loss of sovereignty and the sacred journey to reclaim it. Thus, exorcism, when seen through the eyes of the mystic rather than the moviegoer, is not an act of fear, but an act of courage. It is not a battle with the dark, but a reunion with the light. It invites us to take seriously the inner world we inhabit, and to recognize that healing is not just emotional or physical, but deeply spiritual. In this expanded view, exorcism is not an exotic or a rare event. It is a part of the larger spiritual ecosystem, an act of energetic hygiene, a form of deep soul work, and, above all, a reclaiming of one's sacred place in the universe. To understand the deeper dimensions of spiritual clearing, one must first grasp what is truly meant by possession and attachment, terms that, while often used in sensational or religious contexts, hold a much broader meaning when viewed through a spiritual and energetic lens. Possession is not always the dramatic takeover of a body by an external force, as portrayed in popular culture. More often, it is subtle, insidious, and progressive. Energetically, possession refers to a disruption of sovereignty, a condition in which one's energy field becomes compromised or infiltrated by an outside influence. This can range from minor energetic attachments that cloud perception to more deeply embedded presences that affect one's behavior, emotional state, or health. Psychologically, it can manifest as compulsions, obsessive thoughts, chronic fear, or internal conflict that seems disconnected from one's core self. Spiritually, it signifies a loss of alignment with one's own soul essence and higher self, a kind of energetic hijacking where the authentic voice within is drowned out by something foreign. To speak of possession or attachment spiritually is to acknowledge the multidimensional reality in which we live. Human beings are not merely physical or emotional creatures. We are energetic beings who exist within a larger web of spiritual intelligence and influence. Within this web, just as there are benevolent and guiding forces, there also exist disruptive and parasitic energies that feed off unresolved emotion, fear, and unconsciousness. The nature of these interferences varies widely, but their effects can be profound. One of the most common forms of spiritual interference comes from earthbound spirits or ancestral energies. These are often souls who have passed but remain tethered to the earthly plane due to unresolved trauma, guilt, grief, or attachment. Sometimes they linger in specific places, homes, hospitals, battlefields, or attach themselves to people whose energy resonates with their own unhealed pain. In other cases, ancestral energies become entangled in our aura, especially if we are unconsciously carrying family patterns or soul contracts rooted in generational trauma. These attachments are not always malevolent, but they can be heavy, confusing, and draining if left unacknowledged. Another category includes dark entities, or what some traditions call parasitic thought forms. These are not ghosts or departed souls, but energetic constructs, beings or forms that have come into existence through collective fear, hatred, or unresolved emotional density. They thrive in low-frequency environments and often seek out individuals who are vulnerable, dissociated, or emotionally destabilized. These entities feed on fear, division, and inner chaos. They do not need our belief in order to function. They need only the energetic conditions that sustain them. Sometimes they enter through traumatic experiences or substance abuse. Other times they latch on through participation in destructive relationships, environments, or spiritual practices lacking discernment. Beyond these external beings or forces, there are also emotional imprints and trauma loops, energetic echoes of past experiences, both personal and collective. When trauma occurs, especially in childhood or in highly emotional states, it can leave energetic residue in the body and auric field. These imprints behave like self-repeating patterns that play out in our relationships, choices, and sense of self-worth. While not external entities in the traditional sense, they act as powerful attachments, anchoring us to cycles of suffering until they are witnessed, honored, and transmuted. Spiritual interference may also manifest through curses, psychic attacks, or interdimensional intrusions. These phenomena are often misunderstood or dismissed in modern culture, but nearly every ancient and indigenous tradition has acknowledged them in one form or another. Curses are not necessarily elaborate rituals performed by sorcerers. They can be as simple as the projection of intense hatred, envy, or ill will, especially when that projection is repeated or emotionally charged. Psychic attacks often come from individuals, knowingly or unknowingly, directing negative energy toward others. Interdimensional intrusions refer to energetic influences from realms or frequencies that are not ordinarily perceptible to the physical senses, but still interact with human consciousness. These may be encountered in altered states, through reckless spiritual experimentation, or even through the unconscious opening of portals via trauma or energetic vulnerability. In each of these cases, the common thread is that something foreign enters or influences the energy field of the individual, leading to symptoms that can range from mild energetic fatigue to full disassociation, identity confusion, or physical illness. However, it's important to emphasize that no energy can invade without some form of invitation, resonance, or opening, even if that opening is unconscious or rooted in ancestral pain. This is where the role of fear, trauma, and emotional wounding becomes central. These experiences do more than just leave psychological scars. They can fragment the energy field, lower one's vibrational frequency, and create gaps in the aura through which interference may enter. Chronic fear, unresolved grief, repressed anger, or spiritual disillusionment all weaken the energetic immune system. Just as physical illness is more likely to develop when the body is stressed or depleted, spiritual interference finds fertile ground in those who are emotionally or energetically disempowered. This is not to shame the wounded, far from it. In truth, nearly every human being on the planet carries some form of energetic vulnerability. The purpose of understanding possession and attachment in this way is not to create paranoia, but to awaken compassion and clarity. It is only through awareness that healing becomes possible. By recognizing how these forces operate, we begin to see that spiritual interference is not a punishment or moral failure. It is a signal, a sign that something within us is calling out for integration, healing, and protection. The path of clearing possession or attachment, then, is ultimately the path of remembering and reclaiming our wholeness. It is not about waging war against darkness, but becoming strong enough, loving enough, and spiritually centered enough that nothing foreign can remain in our space. It is about learning to close the doors that were opened by trauma and to call back the parts of ourselves that have become lost in fear or fragmentation. Exorcism is often imagined as an exclusively Catholic phenomenon, dramatized in popular films and sensationalized through stories of demonic possession and priestly intervention. While the Catholic tradition has certainly preserved one of the most recognizable formal rites of exorcism in the Western world, the deeper truth is that spiritual clearing, often referred to as exorcism, but not always in those words, is a cross-cultural, universal practice. It appears in almost every tradition, from ancient civilizations to contemporary mystical systems. This global presence suggests that the experience of spiritual interference and the human instinct to reclaim energetic sovereignty are not anomalies of belief, but rather archetypal aspects of the soul's journey. Within the Catholic Church, exorcism is a highly formalized ritual governed by a detailed theological framework. Rooted in the belief in a personal devil and the capacity for evil spirits to inhabit or influence individuals, the Catholic rite of exorcism involves invoking the authority of Jesus Christ to cast out demons. Priests must be specially trained and authorized by their bishop to perform the rite, which includes the reading of specific prayers, the use of sacramentals such as holy water and crucifixes, and the invocation of saints and angels for protection. While the Church distinguishes between demonic possession and psychological illness, it often approaches these cases cautiously, seeking confirmation through medical and psychological evaluations. Though this system is deeply embedded in Christian cosmology, its deeper function mirrors something found across the world: the need to intervene when a person's well-being is being disrupted by an invisible force. In Sufi mysticism, the removal of intrusive entities, often referred to as jinn, is a more fluid and experiential process. Jinn, in Islamic cosmology, are beings created from smokeless fire, existing in a parallel world that occasionally overlaps with the human one. Not all jinn are malevolent, but when they become attached to a person due to trauma, energetic vulnerability, or spiritual imbalance, Sufi healers may employ dhikr, repetitive chanting of divine names, sacred verses from the Quran, and deeply intuitive spiritual diagnostics to expel the jinn and restore the soul's harmony. These practices are not rooted in fear or aggression, but in remembrance, alignment, and purification of the heart. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, one of the most spiritually complex and psychologically profound practices addressing spiritual interference is chad, a ritual designed not to destroy spirits or attachments, but to confront and appease them through radical compassion and offering. In chad, the practitioner visualizes offering their own body as sacred food to demons or obstructing spirits, dissolving the egoic self in an act of spiritual generosity. This is not an act of martyrdom, but of transcendence. By releasing fear and attachment, the practitioner transforms the power dynamic and dissolves the illusion of separation between self and other. The result is not the banishment of spirits, but the transformation of energetic patterns through direct engagement and fearless surrender. African traditional spiritual systems present some of the most intricate and community-oriented practices for confronting spiritual affliction. Across various cultures, such as among the Yoruba, Zulu, or the Dagara, spiritual warfare is not simply an individual battle, but a communal and ancestral process. Spiritual attacks or possessions are often seen as the result of broken spiritual contracts, ancestral imbalances, or witchcraft. Rituals may include drumming, chanting, herbal cleansing, animal sacrifice, or invocation of deities and ancestors. The afflicted person is not viewed as a sinner or victim, but as someone caught in a larger network of energetic or ancestral entanglement. The ritual aims to identify the root cause, be it a curse, an unsettled spirit, or a family lineage issue and restore balance, often with the involvement of the entire community. Among indigenous and shamanic cultures throughout the Americas, Asia, and Oceania, exorcism is embedded in the broader practice of soul retrieval, spirit extraction, and spiritual medicine work. Shamanic practitioners act as intermediaries between worlds, entering trance states to journey into non-ordinary realms on behalf of the afflicted. Possession or illness is often seen as a result of soul loss, where parts of the soul fragment due to trauma or shock, and as an opening through which spirits or intrusive energies can enter. The shaman may perform rituals to retrieve lost soul fragments, remove intrusive energies, or negotiate with spirits to release their hold. This is sacred and highly skilled work, conducted with the utmost respect for the spirit world, often passed down through lineage and apprenticeship. These rituals affirm the interconnectedness of body, soul, earth, and spirit, and healing is always relational, not transactional. In Hindu spiritual science, particularly within the Ayurvedic branch of Buddha Vidya, the science of spirits, the concept of spiritual possession and energetic interference is taken seriously and treated through a combination of ritual, herbal medicine, and mantra. A Buddha, loosely translated as spirit or being, may attach to a person who is energetically weakened or karmically vulnerable. Traditional Vedic or Tantric healers may perform pujas, recite protective mantras, offer specific fire ceremonies, homas, and use blessed substances such as holy ash, sandalwood, or tulsi. Importantly, spiritual interference is understood as part of a cosmic and karmic dance, not merely a case of good versus evil, but a complex interplay of energies that can ultimately serve as catalysts for awakening when properly resolved. The New Age and esoteric traditions of the West have reinterpreted spiritual clearing through the lens of energy work, frequency, and multidimensional consciousness. In this paradigm, exorcism is less about confrontation and more about raising vibration, restoring energetic integrity, and invoking higher light. Techniques such as auric field cleansing, cord cutting, psychic surgery, and light buddy repair are used to remove attachments or blockages. Practitioners may invoke archangels, use sacred geometries, channel divine light, or perform intuitive energy extractions. The goal is to restore the natural flow of divine energy and align the person with their soul blueprint. These methods reflect a postmodern synthesis of ancient mystical knowledge and contemporary spiritual psychology, emphasizing empowerment, spiritual sovereignty, and self-healing. What becomes evident across all these traditions, despite differences in language, theology, or ritual, is that spiritual interference is universally acknowledged, and so is the sacred necessity of clearing and restoration. Whether through prayer, rhythm, ritual offering, sacred invocation, or energetic transmutation, the soul's right to be free, clear, and aligned with its divine nature is honored across cultures and time. What also unites these paths is the understanding that healing is not simply about removal. It is about restoration, of connection, of balance, of the soul's original light. Each tradition in its own way teaches that true exorcism is not just about casting something out, but about calling something home. It is about remembering that within each person resides a sacred force far greater than any darkness, and that the path of liberation is always a return to that light. In the subtle and often misunderstood landscape of spiritual life, not all suffering originates from the mind or body alone. Sometimes what we experience emotionally, mentally, or physically is not solely the result of trauma, stress, or biochemical imbalance, but rather the reflection of energetic interference in our personal field. Though invisible to the eye, the spiritual realm interacts with human consciousness more intimately than most realize, And when something foreign, parasitic, or misaligned enters this field, it can create distortions that ripple through every layer of our being. Recognizing the symptoms of spiritual interference requires sensitivity and discernment. These signs may not always be dramatic or overt. In fact, the most persistent forms of interference are often the most subtle, whispering beneath the surface of our thoughts, emotions, and impulses until we begin to question our own clarity, purpose, or identity. Understanding these signs is the first step in reclaiming sovereignty, and approaching them with compassion rather than fear is essential. On the emotional and psychological level, spiritual interference often manifests as chronic fear, anxiety, depression, or a sense of hopelessness that seems disproportionate to one's life circumstances. These emotions may come and go without warning, or they may remain constant, as if something is pressing down on the heart or mind. A person may feel plagued by persistent sadness or irritability, yet be unable to trace its source. They may experience waves of panic or despair that feel foreign, as though the emotions do not entirely belong to them. Mentally, the interference may show up as intrusive thoughts, especially those that are violent, obsessive, degrading, or shame-inducing. These are not simply negative self-talk patterns rooted in low self-esteem. Rather, they feel imposed like a voice that repeats itself just beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, attempting to dominate perception or sow seeds of confusion. In some cases, individuals report feeling as if their thoughts are no longer their own, or as though something inside them is working against their higher intentions. Physically, spiritual interference can manifest as chronic fatigue, tension in the body, or nervous system imbalance without a clear medical cause. Sleep may become disrupted. Recurring nightmares, often with dark or symbolic content, may surface, pointing toward unresolved spiritual entanglements. The person may feel drained after visiting specific places or spending time with certain people, as though their energy is being siphoned. Unexplained bodily sensations, pressure, coldness, or sudden pain may accompany these other symptoms, especially during prayer or spiritual practice. Behaviorally, a person under the influence of spiritual interference may experience cycles of self-sabotage, addiction, or compulsive behavior that resist logical explanation. They may make choices that repeatedly pull them away from their goals or highest path, even when they are consciously committed to healing or transformation. Relationships may become strained, not only due to the behavior itself, but due to an unspoken energetic discord that others subconsciously perceive. The individual may begin to isolate themselves, feeling unsafe in the world or emotionally overwhelmed without clear cause. One of the more spiritually oriented signs of interference is a disconnection from the higher self. This is often described as a sense of spiritual dullness or internal disorientation, a loss of intuitive clarity, inner peace, or soul alignment. The person may feel as though their spiritual practices are no longer effective, that meditation or prayer feels blocked, or that they are moving through life with a kind of spiritual amnesia. This sensation can be deeply distressing, especially for those who are used to feeling connected to a higher purpose or inner light. In many cases, these symptoms do not emerge in isolation. Rather, they compound over time, creating a multidimensional sense of disturbance that affects mind, body, and spirit simultaneously. The individual may begin to lose confidence in their own intuition, become overly reactive to external stimuli, or feel haunted by a lingering sense that something is off, yet be unable to articulate exactly what it is. It is essential, however, to hold all of these signs with a discerning heart and a grounded mind. Not every difficult emotion, mental challenge, or physical ailment is the result of spiritual interference. Mental health issues, unresolved trauma, and neurochemical imbalances can and do produce similar symptoms. This is why discernment is crucial. A spiritual lens should not replace psychological understanding, but rather complement it. In many cases, spiritual and psychological healing must walk hand in hand. Emotional wounds create openings in the energy field, just as chronic energetic imbalance can deepen psychological patterns. The soul and psyche are not separate. True healing often requires addressing both. For example, someone struggling with addiction may benefit profoundly from trauma-informed therapy, but also from spiritual clearing work that addresses energetic cords, ancestral burdens, or spirit attachments reinforcing the addiction. Likewise, someone experiencing persistent fear may need support from mental health professionals while also clearing external influences that feed off that fear. What matters most is not labeling or pathologizing, but creating an integrated space for healing. The presence of spiritual interference is not a failure. It is not a sign of weakness or moral impurity. Rather, it is a signal that something within the soul's ecosystem is out of balance, that the light within has been obscured but not extinguished. When we begin to recognize these signs for what they are, we reclaim power over our inner landscape. We shift from victimhood to awareness, from confusion to curiosity. We begin to ask the right questions. What have I taken on that is not mine? What part of me has become disempowered or disconnected? Where have I allowed fear to take root in place of faith? This inquiry is the beginning of liberation. With the right support, be it through energy healing, spiritual mentorship, ritual, or therapeutic care, what once seemed dark and overwhelming can become the soil in which a deeper awakening takes place. In cultures across the world, the responsibility of clearing spiritual interference has always rested with individuals who are called, trained, and entrusted with the task of guiding others through inner darkness into the light. Whether we refer to them as exorcists, shamans, medicine people, mystics, Sufi healers, Buddhist lamas, or energy workers, these individuals play a profound role in restoring spiritual equilibrium. They serve as intermediaries between seen and unseen realms, navigating the subtle dimensions where energetic imbalance, spirit attachment, and soul fragmentation reside. While the term exorcist may evoke a specific image tied to Christian theology, typically a priest commanding demons in Latin, the truth is that across the globe, exorcism is practiced under many names and forms. In Sufi traditions, the healer may guide jinn out through prayer, dhikr, and divine names. In indigenous ceremonies, a shaman may enter trance to retrieve a soul part or remove a spiritual intrusion. In Tibetan Buddhism, a lama may perform ritual offerings to appease wandering spirits. In African spiritual systems, an initiated elder might conduct cleansing rites involving song, invocation, and elemental tools. In modern energy work, a healer may conduct psychic surgery, cord cutting, or multidimensional clearing to remove parasitic thought forms or heavy entities. Though the tools and cosmologies differ, the essence of the healer's role remains the same: to serve as a channel for divine intelligence, to maintain deep humility before the unseen world, and to support others in returning to their own soul sovereignty. True spiritual clearing is never about domination or control. It is about facilitating reunion with the sacred self, assisting in the release of energies that no longer serve, and holding space for deep transformation. Because of the power and subtlety of this work, not everyone who wishes to perform exorcisms or energy healing is suited to do so. The spiritual integrity of the practitioner is paramount. This path is not for the curious or the ego-driven. It is for those who have undergone their own deep purification, who are committed to continual self-reflection, and who understand that the work is not about personal power, but about service to something far greater than the self. A qualified practitioner must embody humility, discernment, compassion, and unwavering devotion to the truth. They must be spiritually anchored, emotionally stable, and energetically clear. Their presence should evoke trust, not fear. Their words should uplift, not manipulate. Their work should lead the individual not into dependence or drama, but into greater autonomy, clarity, and empowerment. One of the most dangerous distortions in spiritual clearing is the intrusion of ego and sensationalism. In modern times, particularly with the rise of online visibility, some individuals seek notoriety by dramatizing their encounters with dark forces or portraying themselves as heroic warriors against evil. While it is true that energetic interference can be real and intense, drama is not a measure of spiritual power, nor is spectacle a sign of effectiveness. In fact, the most profound exorcisms are often quiet, subtle, and deeply reverent. They unfold not in shouting matches or fear-inducing performances, but in gentle, focused intention and deep surrender to divine guidance. Practitioners who engage in spiritual clearing without the necessary inner preparation or ethical grounding not only put themselves at risk, but can cause harm to those they are meant to help. Invoking spiritual forces without discernment, entering energetic realms without protection, or diagnosing possession irresponsibly can destabilize clients, reinforce trauma, or create false narratives that distract from real healing. This is why rigorous training, supervision, and spiritual maturity are not optional. They are essential. Protection is another vital element. Those who perform clearing work must know how to ground their own energy, seal their field, call in spiritual protection, and maintain boundaries between their consciousness and that of the client. Just as a surgeon must sterilize their tools and wear protective gear, an energy healer must be energetically and spiritually clean. They must also be willing to do their own shadow work, clearing their own unresolved fear, pride, or trauma so they do not unconsciously transfer it onto others. Equally important is discernment. A responsible practitioner understands the delicate balance between spiritual interference and psychological struggle. They do not over-spiritualize every symptom, nor do they dismiss intuitive insights in favor of purely clinical thinking. They seek to work in harmony with other healing modalities, recognizing that therapy, medicine, ritual, and energy work can all be part of a holistic approach to healing. In fact, the best exorcists and energy healers know when to say, "This is beyond my scope," and refer a client to another trusted professional when necessary. Ultimately, the true exorcist or spiritual healer is not someone who fights darkness, but someone who holds unwavering faith in the light. They serve not by force, but by presence. They become instruments through which divine harmony can flow. They do not take credit for the transformation. They honor the mystery and thank the unseen allies who walk with them. They recognize that every act of clearing is also an act of creation, making space for truth, for healing, for soul remembrance. This path is sacred. It is not glamorous. It demands sacrifice, devotion, humility, and inner purification. But for those who are called to it, the reward is not in recognition. It is in witnessing the moment when the soul returns to itself. When the confusion lifts, when the tears fall, when the light shines through once more. The practice of exorcism, when understood through the wider lens of spiritual clearing, is not solely dependent on the will of the practitioner or the intensity of the intention. It is also supported by a rich tapestry of sacred tools, symbols, elements, and ritual technologies that assist in creating a container of protection, invocation, and transformation. Across time and culture, spiritual traditions have developed methods to interface with the invisible, harness divine power, and dissolve energetic distortions. These tools are not simply ornamental or symbolic. They function as energetic bridges between the physical and spiritual planes. At the heart of many exorcistic practices lies the use of sacred symbols. Symbols such as the cross in Christianity, the pentacle in esoteric traditions, the yantra in Hindu Tantra, or the ankh in ancient Egyptian ritual are not merely religious emblems. They are archetypal patterns that hold frequency. These symbols have been encoded over centuries with spiritual intention and devotional energy, and when used with reverence and focus, they can act as conduits for divine power. A cross held during a Catholic exorcism is believed not to ward off evil because of superstition, but because it represents the authority of Christ consciousness. A pentacle drawn in ritual space is not a superstition, but a geometrical gatekeeper, anchoring the 5 elements in balance and invoking spiritual guardianship. These symbols are activated not by belief alone, but by conscious connection to what they represent. Another central component of spiritual clearing is the use of mantras, prayers, psalms, or invocations. Spoken word carries vibration. Sacred language, especially when chanted with emotional presence and spiritual focus, has the capacity to recalibrate energy fields. In Sufi and Islamic traditions, the recitation of Quranic verses and divine names is a powerful tool for dissolving spiritual interference. In Hinduism, mantras such as the Gayatri or Mahamrityunjaya are used to invoke protection, clarity, and divine light. Psalms in Judeo-Christian traditions are often recited during blessings, healings, and exorcisms, as they carry encoded frequencies of spiritual alignment. Invocations of divine beings, ancestors, saints, or spirit allies are not calls of desperation. They are invitations to presence, welcoming in forces that operate from realms of light, intelligence, and love. Alongside these invocations, the physical elements themselves are often employed as sacred agents of transformation. Across the world, herbs, resins, salts, and waters are used to cleanse, banish, or consecrate. Sage, for example, is commonly burned to clear stagnant or heavy energy, but its power lies in the combination of its natural volatile oils and the intention of the practitioner. Frankincense, with its history rooted in priestly rites and temple ceremonies, is used to lift energy and invoke high spiritual frequencies. Salt is considered a purifier and boundary sealer, whether sprinkled around a space, used in ritual baths, or placed in bowls to absorb energy. Water, especially water that has been blessed or prayed over, acts as a carrier of intention and can neutralize discordant vibrations. Fire, in the form of candles or ceremonial flames, transmutes lower energies, symbolizing divine presence and spiritual illumination. Sound also plays a significant role in the exorcistic process. Bells, drums, singing bowls, and vocal tones are not just for ambience. They are vibrational instruments that shake loose stuck energy and break through psychic congestion. The beating of a shaman's drum is rhythmic and purposeful, designed to shift consciousness and create a bridge between worlds. Singing bowls, particularly those tuned to chakra frequencies, realign the subtle body and clear auric distortion. In some traditions, the practitioner may use their voice as the primary tool, speaking in prayerful rhythm, chanting mantras, or engaging in what some call light language, an intuitive spiritual dialect said to transmit healing codes beyond the limits of ordinary speech. These sounds disrupt disharmony and call in alignment, functioning much like a tuning fork recalibrates an instrument. In more modern or esoteric practices, Visualization and the use of protective light have become foundational. The human mind, when focused, becomes a powerful projector of energy. A practitioner trained in the use of spiritual imagination may visualize golden light flowing through their body, forming a protective sphere, or extending through their hands during healing work. Visualizing cords being cut, smoke being lifted, or entities being escorted into light are not just mental exercises, they are energetic instructions, encoded with symbolic meaning and delivered with focused intent. The power of visualization lies in its ability to activate archetypal reality within the subconscious mind, creating a resonance that the energetic body then follows. Sacred geometry also holds a vital place in many exorcism and energy clearing practices. Shapes such as the circle, triangle, hexagram, and spiral are not mere designs, they are reflections of cosmic structure. The circle represents wholeness and containment. The triangle represents spiritual ascension and the unity of body, mind, and spirit. When used in rituals, drawn around spaces, embedded in altar cloths, or visualized in meditation, these geometries serve as portals and protectors. Some esoteric practitioners also work with planetary timing, aligning their rituals with phases of the moon, planetary hours, or celestial alignments that correspond to certain spiritual frequencies. These timings are not superstitions, but attempts to synchronize with the rhythm of the cosmos, enhancing the potency of the work through natural harmony. And central to all of this, perhaps the most essential tool in spiritual exorcism, is the invocation of divine authority. Whether that is God, the Creator, Source, Christ consciousness, the Supreme Being, or a sacred name passed through mystical lineage, the naming of divine presence carries immense energetic weight. Speaking the name is not a performance. It is a declaration of truth, that all other energies must submit to the light of the infinite. In many traditions, this invocation is the turning point. It marks the shift from resistance to surrender, from struggle to transformation. The name, when spoken with reverence and alignment, is not merely uttered. It is called forth, resonating through the layers of reality and anchoring a divine current that no darkness can withstand. These tools, when used with humility, clarity, and right relationship, do not act as magical weapons or mystical toys. They are extensions of the soul's authority, instruments that amplify the light already present within the practitioner and the person receiving the clearing. Without presence and intention, they are inert. With sacred focus, they become vessels of extraordinary healing power. The true potency of any spiritual tool lies not in its outward form, but in the integrity and alignment with which it is used. When invoked with wisdom and heart, these rituals become more than symbolic gestures. They become doorways through which the soul is freed, the energy field is restored, and the divine is remembered once again. While much of the discourse around exorcism tends to focus on external forces, spirits, entities, or intrusive energies, the most profound and lasting form of clearing does not occur solely through ritual, symbols, or sacred words. It unfolds within. Inner exorcism is the process of confronting and releasing the internal shadows that bind us, the beliefs, fears, traumas, and unconscious contracts that create openings in our energetic field and tether us to patterns of suffering. It is the sacred work of facing ourselves with unflinching honesty and returning to the wholeness we once fragmented. At the heart of inner exorcism lies shadow work, the courageous act of turning inward to face the aspects of ourselves we have repressed, denied, or disowned. The shadow, as described by depth psychology and mysticism alike, is not evil. It is simply unconscious. It is the accumulation of unprocessed pain, distorted beliefs, inherited shame, and buried memory that we have pushed out of conscious awareness in order to survive or fit into the expectations of others. But these suppressed aspects do not remain dormant. When not brought into light, they take on a life of their own. They become projected onto others. They fuel cycles of self-sabotage, addiction, and inner division. And in many cases, they become the energetic hooks through which external spiritual interference can take hold. Ego purification, then, becomes an act of spiritual self-exorcism. The ego, in its healthy state, is a bridge between soul and body, self and other, spirit and form. But when distorted by trauma, fear, or separation consciousness, it becomes rigid, defensive, and rooted in illusion. Ego purification is not about destroying the ego, but about cleansing it of false identity, of the masks we wear, the roles we cling to, and the control mechanisms we use to avoid vulnerability. As these layers are dissolved, the soul emerges, no longer hidden beneath protective armor. We come into greater alignment with our authentic essence, and in doing so, we close the energetic doors that once allowed interference to enter. In this process, we also begin to identify and release negative beliefs, toxic patterns, and unconscious contracts. These often act as psychic agreements, subtle energetic vows made during moments of fear, trauma, or conditioning. They sound like, I am not safe, I don't deserve love, I must suffer to be spiritual, or I am responsible for everyone else's pain. While these beliefs may seem internal, they generate frequencies that attract corresponding energies and experiences. Some of them may even stem from ancestral trauma or past life residue embedded in the deeper layers of the soul's memory. Inner exorcism involves consciously recognizing these contracts, questioning their origin, and revoking their influence through spiritual declaration and energetic clearing. In many traditions, this process is supported by soul retrieval, a form of spiritual healing that recognizes that traumatic events often cause parts of the soul to fragment and disconnect. When a part of the self retreats due to shock, betrayal, or sustained abuse, a kind of inner vacancy is left behind. These gaps in the energy field not only result in emotional numbness or disconnection, but also create openings where external forces can attach themselves. Reclaiming these fragmented soul parts is a vital step in inner exorcism. Whether through shamanic journeying, somatic healing, deep meditation, or guided visualization, soul retrieval brings lost aspects of the self home. It reintegrates forgotten strengths, restores forgotten memories, and rebuilds the integrity of the soul's blueprint. The link between trauma and spiritual interference cannot be overstated. Trauma fractures time and consciousness. It leaves people feeling out of their bodies, disconnected from their inner compass, and vulnerable to energies that mirror their inner chaos. Until trauma is healed at its roots, not only intellectually but emotionally and energetically, it continues to recreate patterns of fragmentation that spiritual entities can easily inhabit. Many attachments do not arrive from the outside at all. They are born from within, created by the energetic residue of trauma that has not yet been witnessed or transmuted. This is why inner exorcism is not simply about defense or banishment. It is about integration. It is not about spiritual warfare, but about spiritual reconciliation, the remembering of what was forgotten, the healing of what was broken, the loving embrace of what was rejected. Integral to this process is the sacred practice of forgiveness and surrender. These are not passive gestures. They are acts of power and transmutation. Forgiveness is not condoning harm. It is severing the psychic ties that bind us to those who harmed us. It is saying, you no longer get to define my energy or my story. Forgiveness liberates the soul not from accountability, but from bondage. It breaks curses carried through generations. It dissolves the emotional glue that keeps pain alive. And in that dissolution, what was once dark begins to lose its form. Surrender, likewise, is not weakness. It is the letting go of control, fear, and resistance. It is the moment when we place the burden of battle into the hands of the divine and trust that healing is not something we force, it is something we allow. Surrender makes space for grace. It opens the way for divine intelligence to do what the personal will cannot. In surrender, the false self begins to die, not in a way that destroys, but in a way that rebirths. The soul expands into the space that fear once occupied. Light reclaims what was once shadowed. Inner exorcism is not a single ritual or cathartic release. It is an unfolding journey, a process of spiritual maturing in which we learn to meet ourselves with radical honesty, unwavering compassion, and the courage to welcome every part of our being home. It does not require us to be perfect. It requires us to be present. It calls us to take responsibility for our own energy, to stop outsourcing blame, and to understand that most of what haunts us can be healed if we are willing to sit with it long enough to listen. And in the quiet after the storm, in the stillness that follows the inner work, something remarkable occurs. A spaciousness returns. A clarity dawns. A sense of being both emptied and filled. We are no longer hiding from the dark. We are standing in the light. We are no longer battling our own shadows. We are walking with them, hand in hand, toward the center of the soul. At the deepest level of spiritual healing, the most powerful force is not confrontation, ritual objects, or any singular technique. The most potent source of liberation is divine light, the pure, intelligent, creative force that underlies all of existence, and the conscious intention of the soul invoking it. When interference arises, whether in the form of emotional disturbance, spiritual oppression, or energetic distortion, it is not our willpower alone that clears it. It is the act of aligning ourselves with a higher frequency, of remembering who we truly are, and of calling forth the light that cannot be corrupted, manipulated, or diminished. This is where true transformation begins, not in resistance, but in radiant remembrance. The invocation of divine names, source, or the higher self is not merely symbolic. It is an act of spiritual legislation. Across traditions and mystical lineages, the practice of calling on the sacred name of the divine has been recognized as a gateway to power, clarity, and energetic authority. In ancient Judaism and mystical Christianity, the name of God, whether spoken as Yahweh, El Shaddai, or I Am, was believed to carry immense creative and destructive potential. In Islamic mysticism, the 99 names of Allah are not simply poetic. Each one invokes a unique divine attribute and vibration. In Vedic traditions, Sanskrit mantras call on divine archetypes and universal principles. When a person consciously invokes the divine not as a distant concept, but as a living, immediate presence, the energetic landscape shifts. Entities flee. The subconscious aligns. The aura expands. The soul remembers its place in the divine order. This is not a passive gesture. It is an active command rooted in surrender. When we call upon Source or the higher self, we are not begging for rescue. We are summoning our own eternal nature. The higher self is not something separate from us. It is the part of our consciousness that remains whole, untouched, and radiant beyond time, trauma, or distortion. To call on it is to bring its intelligence down into the density of human life. It is to reclaim the throne within, the place of sovereignty where nothing foreign can remain. In many healing and clearing practices, this invocation is supported by the presence of spiritual allies, archangels, spirit guides, light beings, and ancestral protectors. While modern skepticism may reduce these beings to archetypes or psychological projections, mystics across the world know otherwise. These presences are not fabrications. They are part of a greater web of consciousness, beings who exist in higher frequencies, operating beyond the veil, and who are available to assist us when called with reverence, clarity, and purpose. Archangelic forces, such as Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel, are not mythological characters. They are intelligent emanations of divine order. Each carries a specific frequency of healing, protection, communication, or transmutation. When invoked during spiritual clearing or personal prayer, these beings do not replace our own agency. They amplify it. They bring reinforcements to the soul, stabilize the energetic field, and help dissolve attachments that are resistant to mental effort alone. The same is true of ancestral guides and ascended masters who walk with us through lifetimes. Their presence is not coercive but cooperative. They respond to our readiness, our intention, and our inner alignment. At the core of all spiritual protection is sovereignty, the soul's unwavering declaration that it belongs to no external force, ideology, or entity, but to the divine alone. Affirmative declarations are not just affirmations in the casual sense. They are energetic commands spoken from the seat of inner truth that establish a new frequency in the field. Statements such as, "I revoke all contracts not made in love," or "I am a sovereign being aligned with divine truth," or "only that which serves my highest light may remain in my field," are not empty phrases. They are vibrational instructions. When spoken with clarity, intention, and presence, they act as decrees that reshape the energetic architecture of one's reality. The more these declarations are used with conscious awareness, the more they begin to reprogram the subconscious and dissolve pathways of interference. They fortify the aura, stabilize the emotional body, and reorient the mind toward truth. This is not bypassing pain. It is reclaiming authority in the midst of it. It is refusing to identify with suffering and choosing instead to align with the part of us that has never been wounded and never will be. In contemporary spiritual healing, many practitioners are integrating these ancient truths into quantum healing modalities and light-based technologies. Quantum healing recognizes that transformation is not linear. It can happen instantaneously when consciousness collapses into a new reality. In this view, healing is not about effort or struggle. It is about coherence. When a person holds a coherent frequency of love, intention, and divine remembrance, the lower densities, fear, trauma, interference, begin to dissolve naturally. Techniques such as theta healing, light language transmissions, holographic reprogramming, and energy grid repair are built upon the understanding that the body is an energy field, the mind is a transmitter, and the soul is a creative force. These practices often use visualized light, golden, white, or violet, as a form of energetic recalibration. This is not imagination in the ordinary sense. It is intentional visualization charged with faith. When someone imagines a pillar of divine light entering their crown, spreading through the spine, and radiating outward, they are not fantasizing. They are shifting electromagnetic and quantum patterns. They are directing their consciousness in a way that alters their physical, emotional, and energetic state. Light is intelligent. It carries information. When summoned consciously, it brings clarity, reorders cellular memory, and reactivates the dormant codes of the soul. This is the essence of light technology, not devices or tools, but the soul's capacity to command and transmit frequencies through intention, sound, and visualization. All of this points to a profound truth. We are not powerless victims of unseen forces. We are luminous beings, encoded with the capacity to transmute, to heal, to invoke, and to transform. When we align our intention with divine light, and when we speak from the truth of who we are, no distortion can withstand that radiance. The power of divine light and conscious intention is not reserved for mystics, saints, or energy healers. It is available to every soul. It begins with remembering. It is sustained by practice. And it flourishes in love. The moment of spiritual clearing, whether through exorcism, energy healing, or deep inner release, is a threshold. It is the lifting of a burden, the breaking of a psychic chain, and the removal of energies that were never meant to reside within the soul's sacred space. But the clearing itself is only part of the journey. What happens after the exorcism is just as important as the ritual itself. Once the interfering force is gone, the space it once occupied must be lovingly reclaimed and consciously tended. Otherwise, it may be left vulnerable to reintrusion or filled with new forms of confusion, fear, or chaos. Integration and protection are not about paranoia or obsessively monitoring every energetic shift. Rather, they are practices of deep respect, acts of devotion to the self, the soul, and the divine architecture that we are entrusted to inhabit. Just as a wound needs time and care to close, the energy field also requires attention, grounding, and nourishment after an exorcism or major clearing. One of the most essential first steps after any spiritual intervention is grounding. When someone undergoes a spiritual clearing, particularly if it has involved the removal of long-standing attachments, trauma imprints, or parasitic thought forms, they may feel disoriented, emotionally raw, or overly expanded. This is not unusual. The energy body has shifted. The nervous system is adjusting. Old patterns may suddenly fall away, and the self may not yet feel fully integrated. Grounding practices such as walking barefoot on the earth, slow breathing, deep body awareness, or eating warm, nourishing foods help bring the soul back into the body and stabilize the physical container. Alongside grounding, it is also important to seal the aura and restore energetic boundaries. During periods of spiritual interference, the aura often becomes porous, torn, or depleted. The act of clearing creates an opening, but that opening must be resealed. Visualization is a powerful tool here. Imagine your aura as a golden or white sphere surrounding your body, pulsing with strength, light, and integrity. You may also use physical support such as anointing oils, protective stones, or salt baths to reinforce this energetic containment. Sealing the field communicates to both the subconscious and the spiritual world, I am whole. I am sovereign. I am protected. Yet integration does not stop with grounding and sealing. True protection is ongoing alignment, a way of life, a spiritual hygiene practice that reinforces clarity, strength, and peace over time. Just as we clean our homes and bodies regularly, our energetic and spiritual systems require maintenance and care. This is not a burden, but a sacred rhythm, one that reconnects us daily to what is true. Prayer is one of the most potent tools for this maintenance. Whether spoken aloud or held in silence, prayer acts as a tuning fork that harmonizes the soul with divine intelligence. It reminds the individual that they are never alone, and that they walk with unseen allies who stand ready to assist. Meditation, too, anchors the mind and cleanses the inner landscape. It provides a space where insight can rise and where the nervous system can recalibrate after long exposure to fear or external disturbance. Other supportive practices include cord cutting, which releases energetic ties to people, places, or past events that no longer serve the soul's evolution. These cords, especially those rooted in trauma or emotional enmeshment, can continue to siphon energy or recreate old dynamics even after a clearing. Regular cord cutting, done through guided visualization, breath work, or intention allows the individual to take full ownership of their field again. Protection rituals can also be simple yet powerful. Lighting a candle and setting a daily intention, placing a protective talisman at your door, invoking the guardians of your space each morning. These acts accumulate energetic authority. The point is not the ritual itself, but the consciousness behind it. It is the embodiment of spiritual sovereignty in motion. Many find it helpful to work regularly with angels, guides, or divine archetypes who resonate with their path. These higher intelligences do not replace our free will, they empower it. Inviting their presence into daily life, whether through altar work, prayer, or intuitive connection, creates a field of spiritual companionship that strengthens the aura and uplifts the emotional body. Archangel Michael, for example, is often invoked for protection and boundary reinforcement. Kuan Yin is called upon for compassion and emotional healing. Your own ancestral guides may offer specific blessings, insight, or instructions. When honored consistently, these spiritual relationships become part of your inner support system, always available, always guiding, always illuminating the path. Yet perhaps the most profound act of post-clearing protection is the creation of a sacred life. This means more than spiritual practices. It means aligning our environment, our speech, our thoughts, and our behaviors with the truth we now remember. Create spaces that feel safe, uplifting, and energetically clean. Remove objects or influences that carry painful associations or heavy memories. Speak words that affirm life, love, and integrity, both to yourself and to others. Monitor the quality of your thoughts, not as a form of judgment, but as a form of stewardship. Choose to entertain thoughts that reflect your divine nature. Treat your time, your body, and your energy with reverence. When the sacred becomes a way of being, lower forces cannot find purchase. The light within becomes too strong, too consistent, too vibrant to be distorted. Post-exorcism integration is not just about staying protected. It is about living from your center again. It is about rediscovering your place in the world not as a victim of spiritual interference, but as a conscious participant in divine order. It is about stabilizing the transformation that has occurred, allowing the new frequency to take root, and preparing the soul to rise into even greater clarity, power, and service. In this way, the healing becomes permanent. The clearing becomes embodied. The soul that was once fragmented becomes a sanctuary, radiant, sovereign, and whole. As spiritual interest deepens and ancient practices such as exorcism, energy healing, and entity removal resurface in contemporary consciousness, it becomes increasingly vital to bring discernment, ethics, and emotional intelligence to the forefront. While these practices can be profoundly liberating and transformative, they also exist within a delicate and potent domain, one where trauma, fear, belief systems, and the unseen intersect. Without proper understanding, guidance, and humility, spiritual clearing can become more harmful than healing. Misapplication or misinterpretation not only endangers those seeking help, but also distorts the sacred lineage of these practices. One of the most significant dangers is the impulse to attempt an exorcism alone without proper training, support, or spiritual authority. Popular media and sensationalist narratives have given many the impression that exorcism is simply a matter of shouting commands or repeating certain phrases. In reality, exorcism, when done responsibly, is not a spectacle. It is sacred, high-risk spiritual work that requires grounded preparation, protection, discernment, and deep energetic capacity. Attempting to confront spiritual entities or energetic attachments without the skill, energetic integrity, or spiritual guidance can result in further entanglement, psychological destabilization, or even energetic retaliation. This is especially true for those who are emotionally vulnerable, spiritually inexperienced, or carrying unresolved trauma. Clearing work should never be approached with casual curiosity or ego-driven enthusiasm. In many spiritual lineages, one does not choose to become an exorcist. It is a calling that emerges after years of preparation, purification, and initiatory testing. The practitioner is trained not only in technique, but in humility, restraint, and sacred listening. For those who feel overwhelmed by interference or who sense they may be dealing with spirit attachment, the wisest course of action is to seek support from a qualified, grounded healer, someone who can hold space with both spiritual authority and emotional sensitivity. Another danger in this field is the rising trend of spiritual dramatization and bypassing, particularly in online and influencer-driven spaces. It has become increasingly common to see people glamorize their experiences with entities or dark energies, framing themselves as powerful warriors or dramatizing symptoms to gain attention. While some of these experiences may indeed be valid, the performative aspect distorts the sacredness of the work. It also creates confusion for those genuinely suffering who may feel compelled to imitate the language or behavior of others in order to be seen or validated. More insidiously, dramatization can serve as a form of spiritual bypassing, where deeper emotional or psychological wounds are avoided under the guise of entity removal or energy attacks. Instead of doing the hard work of healing trauma, grieving loss, or facing core shadow patterns, individuals may externalize their pain, projecting it onto unseen forces. This not only stalls authentic healing, but may reinforce a sense of helplessness or paranoia. Responsible exorcism work must be trauma-informed. Many symptoms attributed to possession or attachment, such as dissociation, intrusive thoughts, emotional volatility, or identity confusion, can also arise from unresolved trauma, complex PTSD, or dissociative conditions. A practitioner who does not understand the physiological and psychological effects of trauma may misdiagnose a client, leading to increased fear or re-traumatization. It is unethical and dangerous to declare someone possessed or under attack without first exploring their emotional and mental health with sensitivity. A trauma-informed approach recognizes the nervous system as a core component of spiritual experience. It respects the vulnerability of the person in front of you. It avoids overwhelming the client with labels, fear, or unnecessary ritual intensity. It seeks to empower, not to frighten. The best practitioners in this field understand that healing does not require spectacle. It requires safety, presence, and integration. They work gently, patiently, and always in collaboration with the individual's pace and consent. Consent, in fact, is a foundational principle in any ethical clearing practice. No one should ever perform an exorcism or energy removal on another person without their clear and informed consent. Even when done with good intentions, unsolicited clearing can be intrusive, disempowering, or energetically destabilizing. This includes remote healing, entity removal, or ancestral work performed on someone's behalf without their knowledge. Spiritual boundaries are just as important as physical ones. True healing honors free will. It invites, but never imposes. Closely connected to consent is the respect for cultural difference. Exorcism practices vary greatly across cultures, and each tradition carries its own sacred methods, cosmologies, and initiatory protocols. What may be effective or appropriate in one culture may be irrelevant or even offensive in another. To appropriate rituals, chants, symbols, or methods from lineages one does not understand or belong to is not only spiritually irresponsible, it is a form of violation. It disconnects sacred practices from their roots and turns them into tools of ego or commodification. To be ethically aligned in spiritual exorcism is to approach this work with humility, education, and reverence for origin. It means understanding one's limitations and honoring the depth of other traditions without attempting to recreate them superficially. It means remembering that true spiritual power never dominates, it liberates. It never exploits, it serves. In a world where so many are awakening to the reality of spiritual energy, where the veil is thinning and the collective trauma is surfacing, the need for ethical, grounded, and heart-centered spiritual healing has never been greater. Exorcism, when practiced with respect, clarity, and spiritual maturity, can be a profound tool for liberation. But it is not a path of ego, control, or spectacle. It is a sacred responsibility, one that requires not only courage and skill, but profound integrity. The future of spiritual healing will not be built on fear, hierarchy, or performance. It will be built on truth, compassion, and the recognition that every soul has the right to return to wholeness. May we rise to meet this responsibility with wisdom, discernment, and unwavering love. If you're looking for a guide to mastering spirituality, we warmly welcome you to our courses. On our website, you'll find a wide range of courses where you can learn everything about spirituality, esotericism, manifesting, astrology, tarot, as well as explore other esoteric arts and spiritual tools. We truly hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyed listening. Feel free to share it with your friends and family so they too can begin their transformation. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and stay connected with us. Thank you for watching. We wish you oceans of abundance, radiant health, overflowing wealth, and true love.